On today's episode of Locked On Wild, 4 players who have taken last year's numbers and thrown them right out the window.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we'll take a look at key contributions for the Wild so far this season, from Mats Zuccarello, Jake Middleton, Freddie Gaudreau, and Marcus Foligno, and why they have taken what happened last year and have put some really impressive numbers on the board so far this season. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild since 2021 and credentialed media member, and we knew going into this Minnesota Wild season that the Wild are going to have to get some better results from a large part of the roster from last season. And we know it doesn't hurt to have a Hart Trophy candidate in Kirill Kaprizov to lead the way. Doesn't hurt to have Matt Boldy on pace for a 50-goal season. But there were going to need to be some other players that stepped up and were able to just be a little better than they were last season. And so we're going to key in on 4 of those players that I think have really done some impressive things so far this season. We're going to start with Mats Zuccarello, because if you look at what happened last year, and we'll do that for all 4 of these players, Zuccarello last year just seemed like became a little too pass happy. Just wasn't scoring nearly as much as he did the last 2 seasons. 2021, 2022, he had 24 goals. 2022, 2023, he had 22 goals. Last season, he had 12. And it seemed like at points was more apt to pass than he was to shoot the puck. And so far this season, in 15 games, he's halfway to last year's goal mark already. Currently on pace for 33 goals, 44 assists, and 77 total points in 82 games played. Now, 82 games, probably not going to happen, but even if you think about the production that we've seen so far this season, on pace for 33 goals, which would shatter what he has done over the last few seasons. Even if he gets in the 20s, I think we consider that a win, just for getting that goal scoring back and being able to be not one of your top 1 or 2 options, but to be one of those key contributors for this team that is able to help Kirill Kaprizov and help Matt Boldy by being one of those secondary scoring options. And it's funny because you look at the number of shots on goal, 29 so far for Mats Zuccarello, with 59 total attempts in 15 games. So still a little bit lower pace than we've seen since he came to Minnesota. I think the numbers, if they stack up right now, he's on pace for somewhere around 164 shots, which is a few less than last year. But shooting 20% doesn't hurt. And I think by having Kirill on his line, that has allowed for him to be given some really, really good opportunities to be able to get shots in close. But I think another key reason as to why we are seeing the numbers so far for Zuccarello trending in a much higher trajectory than what we saw last season is he's doing all this while playing 30 seconds fewer per game than he did last year. He clocked in at just under 19 minutes per game last year. And so far this year is at 18 minutes, 23 seconds, which it may not seem like much right now, but I think John Hines realizing, look, you got a 37-year-old winger, and if there are opportunities for us to just take a couple of minutes off of the workload here and there to keep him more fresh and to be able to therefore get him through more of the season, it adds up. It adds up the higher up on the age scale you get. And so being a little more fresh, but I think being paired with Kirill and also having Marco Rossi, a very capable center with that combination, I think has really led to some much better results so far this season than we saw last year, where, you know, you look up and down the board, Zuccarello in 69 games was a -5 on the season. He had 51 assists, but just the 12 goals. He's on pace to break all of those marks from even the last couple of years, but by shooting more, by being set up by Kirill and really good opportunities to actually shoot the puck and bury it in the back of the net, yeah, those assist numbers are going to come down. But we've talked about this as the season has unfolded, is there are going to be opportunities coming for Kaprizov to really take advantage of these matchups that he's getting, which is going to allow for Zuccarello to have more assists. But the fact that he is way more apt, way more prone thus far to shoot the puck has been a nice positive for the Minnesota Wild that has led to their results being much better than what we saw over the last couple of seasons. So Mats Zuccarello off to a really good start so far this season. As with a lot of what we've talked about, can it continue? But again, here's something to keep in mind. This is a tried and true, proven method of determining where a team is at for playoff positioning. The adage is, if you are in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving, by and large, you will be in one once the season is done. There are some exceptions to that trend, but the Minnesota Wild currently find themselves in the number 2 spot in the Central Division. And so this is trending more and more towards being a legitimate, not just a hot start. Just this is a team that has really good pieces in place to be able to get to the postseason once the year is done. So Zuccarello's numbers too, as we get further and further into the season, it goes from just a hot start to, he's having a pretty darn good season. And that's not to say that there won't be trends where the scoring dries up a little bit or the scoring runs absolutely red hot. But so far this season, on a 77-point pace, I think you would take that 10 days out of 10. 10 times out of 10, 1,000 times out of 1,000. So bravo to Mats Zuccarello for taking what happened last year, shooting a career low 6.9%, and turning that into, so far, a career high at 20.7% shooting so far this year. That's obviously going to come down a tad, but even if he stays in that 15 to 16% range, still a very good season for Zuccarello so far. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got plenty more to get to here for players that are off to much better starts this year than they got off to last year. And we'll talk about a guy who has really started to crank up the scoring, in addition to what he has provided in the faceoff circle. Yes, I'm talking about Steady Freddie. We'll talk about Freddie Gaudreau's start to the season as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NHL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. Minimum purchase may apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by Select Quote. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy in your family's end zone. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day of the week. Take this opportunity, if you have not already, to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube right now, just make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. If you're listening in the car, or if you're at the gym, or wherever you may be listening on our favorite audio platforms, make sure you're following along so you don't miss out as well, because Locked On Wild has you covered every single day of the week. Continuing to look at some bounce back players for the Minnesota Wild so far this season, and a guy who had 15 total points last year and was a minus 23 on the season in 67 games, on pace this year to have a 44-point season, and is currently winning a career high in faceoffs. That is Freddie Gaudreau, who is another player who shook off a rough go last year and has so far been doing some really good things throughout the course of the season. Now, he had his point streak snapped against the Chicago Blackhawks, but Goudreau had a run where he was essentially a point per game. He had points in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight games to get himself up to 8 points on the season with 2 goals. He's got 6 assists, 8 total points in the 15 games. He's on pace for 11 goals and 33 assists for 44 total points, which would shatter what he was at last year. But I think most importantly, Freddie Gaudreau is currently a +7 on the season. So 30 goals different from last year to this year. But some of the other things that I like: he's winning 52.3% of his faceoffs. The only other time he was near that number was in 19 games in 2020, 2021, when he won 87 faceoffs, lost 75. Winning 52.3% of his faceoffs this year, and has really helped be a solidifying presence for that third line, that defensive checking line that the Wild have built as kind of part of their backbone. He has been a huge reason as to why that line has been successful so far this season, is being able to help guys like Marcus Foligno and be a playmaker to set those guys up, to help Ryan Hartman whoever ends up being the wings on that line. Goudreau has been a really good part of that equation that has led to the Wild so far getting off to what is currently the best start in Minnesota Wild history through 15 games. But another thing that I think is helping Goudreau have a much better season so far this year, you look at what happened last year, and in the seasons in which he has regularly played, which has basically been the last 3 seasons, had a career low in time on ice with 13 minutes, 57 seconds last year. This year, he's up to 14 minutes, 32 seconds per night on the ice. I think the fact that the Wild are not trying to use him as a top 6 player, they're allowing him to be a bottom 6, win us some faceoffs, help out on the penalty kill type guy. I think he has really settled into that role considerably so far this season. And the hits and the blocks are up compared to where they've been over the last few seasons. He just, I think, is really at a point where he can just focus on playing as opposed to trying to figure out where he's going to be in the lineup on a nightly basis. And so the fact that you can go from a minus 23 to a plus 7, I think that tells the tale so far this year. But another thing that Goudreau always brings, through 15 games, he has 2 penalty minutes. So you're getting a guy in Goudreau that is just really responsible, is not going to do anything to hurt the team from a out of position type standpoint. He just is playing really solid hockey and has been a big contributor in the role that I think he should have been playing all along, by playing a bottom 6 role and just being able to focus more on the other sides of the game as opposed to having to consistently provide offense in a top 6 spot. He is way more of a defensive type center that can win you faceoffs. And he's gotten an opportunity to really flourish in that role so far this season. From Freddie Gaudreau, we go to Marcus Foligno, and right off the drop, listen to this. Marcus Foligno is on pace for 300 hits this season. He's got 55 in 15 games. Hits don't tell the entirety of the story, but there is a lot that Marcus Foligno has done so far this season that I think has led to his performance being better than we expected, better than it was last year. Now, it's not to say Foligno's performance last year was bad by any stretch of the imagination, but he did only play in 55 games, and 65 the year before that. 74 the year before that was the high water mark that he's had since 2018-2019, his second season with the Minnesota Wild. But he has 3 goals. He's got 2 assists. He's got 5 total points in 15 games, which is great. He's a +3 right now. But his projections have him as a 16 goal, 27-point player, which you absolutely would take for a bottom 6 guy. But the penalty minutes is the one for me. Just 4 penalty minutes so far in 2024-2025. The Wild haven't really fought yet this season. It's not to say that won't change, because it certainly will. But Foligno, you go back to 2021-2022, he had 112 penalty minutes in 74 games. 22-23, he had 97 penalty minutes in 65 games. And last year, 59 penalty minutes in 55 games. And this year has been much more of a factor on the ice because he's been on the ice. He has not missed any games so far this season. He has not been in the penalty box a ton. And so he's had much more of an opportunity to be able to make his presence felt while he's out there on the ice. And he has certainly done that with the 55 hits. But as part of that third line, now that we kind of have seen the settling of Yakov Trenin down to the fourth line. Marcus Foligno has consistently been on the third line all season. Now that we've seen some of the dust settle to where guys are supposed to be slotting in the lineup, he has been able to really help that third line with that physicality, but also that good defense. Like, that third line routinely puts games together where they hardly allow any shot attempts against while they're out on the ice. That's valuable when you go up against the top opponents, the opponent's top line. That's valuable to be able to keep them off the board and to allow your team the opportunity to try to go figure out how to crack the egg on the other side. That is something that was just sorely missed on last year's team. And so Marcus Foligno, another player who has really impressed so far, and his production has been exactly where it needs to be. After now, like I said, his wasn't necessarily production-wise last year, but on the ice. And so far this year, Marcus Foligno has been on the ice both in terms of health and in terms of penalty minutes as well. We'll finish today's show talking about maybe the biggest surprise both on offense and defense so far this season, and a guy who has just really put some solid games together so far this year. We're talking about Midzi, Jake Middleton, as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us tonight at 8 p.m. for another live edition of Locked On Wild. Denny's got some thoughts about the lineup so far. We'll take a look at the projections that Denny set out at the beginning of the season. We'll see who is exceeding, who's meeting, and who is falling short of those expectations so far this season. So join us at 8 p.m. tonight, right here on YouTube. So we've been talking today about players who have gotten off to really good starts and have gotten back to kind of where you'd expect them to be based off of what they've done in previous seasons. But there may not be a player who has both offensively and defensively just opened eyes like Jake Middleton has so far this season. Middleton right now, he's got 9 points. He's got 3 goals, 6 assists in 15 games. He had 25 points all of last season and had 7 goals. So he's already almost halfway to his goal total, which was a career high. He's on pace for 16 goals and 49 points if he plays all 82 games. He's also on pace somehow to be a plus 71, that's a lot of goals. But last year, Middleton was a minus 15. And without Jared Spurgeon, just routinely was on the wrong end of goals being given up. Just seemed like every night there were a couple of goals that happened while he was on the ice defensively. This year, a plus 13. So a 28 goal difference from last year to this year. But he's stepping up defensively. He is adding offensively. He's shooting a career high 12.5% so far this year. And it's not like it's coming on a low amount of shots. He had 85 shots all of last year, so he's averaging right about 1 per game. In 2022-2023, he had 79 shots in 79 games. This year, he has 24 shots in 15 games. So he's averaging over 1, almost 2 shots per game. And shot attempts, he is at 42. So he's adding more offensively than he has over the last few seasons. But the block numbers in 15 games, he's got 39 blocks, and he has 21 hits in 15 games so far this season. So if we take a look at the pace for the blocks, 2.6 per game. Keep that in mind. 2.6 per game. If we take that out over an 82-game season, 213 blocks. Even if he plays somewhere around 78, 79, 80 games, he's still going to be right at about 200 blocks, which shatters the number that he had this past season. And if we take the 21 hits divided by 15, that's 1.4. 82 times 1.4 is 114 hits. So the hits have dropped a little bit. The blocks are way, way up, but Middleton has been a substantial part of the Middleton-Faber defensive pairing, to where he's doing some really good things defensively too. And so not only has the offense taken a jump with Middleton this year, the defense has really come along. And I don't think it's a coincidence that playing with Brock Faber has led to him being up against a lot of top competition. But his play has upped substantially on the defensive side of the ice, to where he's not being put in positions to be exposed. He's just, you feel comfortable having him out there on the ice because the metrics all support what he's done so far this season, and played 19 minutes, 49 seconds per night last year. He's got a little bump this year to 20 minutes, 18 seconds per game. So this is another, I think, of the John Hines effect, is upping minutes where they should be and trying to make sure that we don't go crazy with the minutes for some other players. We didn't even talk about that with Marcus Foligno. Foligno's playing 12 minutes, 37 seconds per night compared to 14 minutes, 29 seconds per night last year, and 14 minutes, 59 seconds the night before, or the year before. Foligno is playing less minutes, which I think is putting less of a strain on his body. And this is just as John Hines kind of figures out this lineup as we get further into the season. It just seems like he is leaning more on the top end guys, but is also trying to make sure that we don't overwork the other parts of the lineup, so that everybody stays fresh, everybody's available as the season unfolds to be able to help this team win games. And from a penalty standpoint as well, Middleton, 77 penalty minutes in 80 games last year, 72 in 79 games the year before that. This year, 4 penalty minutes in 15 games. And that has been maybe the single most surprising part of the season, is just how disciplined this Wild team has been so far this year. But if you think about it, you can't make as good of an impact on games if you're sitting in the penalty box 2 or 3 times a night. And the Wild have not had to parade to the box at nearly the level that they have over the last few years. 3rd fewest penalty minutes in the league, behind the New York Islanders and now the Vegas Golden Knights. but they're 100 penalty minutes clear of the top team, which was Boston, and they're still on pace to cut their penalty minutes in almost half. Now, it's been, the penalty minutes have been on the rise, but it's just not, it's not at the same level that it has been in previous seasons. So it gives you hope that that is something that we're not going to have to see on anywhere close to the basis that it has been over the last couple of seasons. Like right now, the Wild are on pace for 502 penalty minutes, which they were routinely closer to 1,000 over the last few seasons. That makes a big difference, and it allows players to have more of an impact by not sitting in the box. So these are not the only 4 players who have gotten off to much better starts, because I know we kind of roll our eyes a little bit at the guys on the back end, but John Merrill has not been the crater that he was over the last couple of seasons. Zach Bogosian has been serviceable on the back end. These guys that were problems last year especially just have not been so far this season, and it has led to this team being in the second spot in the Central Division and the second most points in the entire Western Conference with what they have done so far. I mean, even look at Marc-Andre Fleury, 3-0-1 so far, 2.7 goals against average and a .904 save percentage. A lot of players that needed to step things up a tad have done so far this year, and that's why the Minnesota Wild's performance has been as good as it has been. So let me know who you think has been the most pleasant bounce back from last season to this season in the comments. Let me know if you think it should be Freddie, Zuccarello. It could be somebody that we didn't even talk about. If you think somebody has been a pleasant bounce back, let us know in the comments, and we'll give you a shout out. So thank you for joining the show today, and thank you for tuning in each and every day of the week. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We've got you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.